Hey everyone, it's Tobes and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the second video in our series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. My plan is to cover every legendary creature from March of the Machine's main set in no particular order, and if there's still interest at the end of all that, I'll do the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and maybe even the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products. If you have a request for a particular commander or a specific way you'd like to see me build one of these decks, let me know in the comments below. As you can see, today our commander is Quintorius, Loremaster. This is just before Quint sparks as a planeswalker, so he's doing lorehold things as he and his friends defend Strixhaven. And like any good Strixhaven card, he has a lot of words and a lot going on. So before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around the commander. I want to be able to showcase what that card is trying to do and its mechanical identity. So I choose about 30 cards as my game plan, which is what that deck is trying to do and how it tries to win. I'll do another 30 cards, 10 each, split among support. Card advantage, acceleration, and interaction, removal, that sort of thing. I usually do 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes a little more depending on what the game plan is, sometimes I don't do any. And then I will generally run 38 lands because I want to be able to hit my land drops. And to be clear, that is in addition to about 10 or more pieces of acceleration. So I don't want to get stalled out. The best thing in Commander is playing Commander. You can't do that if you don't have enough mana. So let's talk about Quintorius. Quintorius is a 3/5 Elephant Cleric with Vigilance for 3, a red, and a white. So 5 mana Commander. Sometimes that's a little slow. Quintorius has 2 other abilities besides Vigilance that are what the deck is built around. The first is, at the beginning of your end step, exile target non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard, create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. So we're going to see these 3/2 spirits a lot. But notice that this ability targets. So if we, at the beginning of our end step, target a non-creature, non-land in our graveyard, and our opponent exiles it somehow with maybe Scavenging Ooze, then we won't make our spirit because this is all one ability and we no longer have a valid target for it. So something worth keeping in mind. Quint's other ability is for 1 red and a white, tap him and sacrifice a spirit, which of course can be one of the tokens he makes. Choose a target card exiled with Quintorius. You may cast that card this turn without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, put it in the bottom of its owner's library instead. So this is a little different from some of the effects we've seen that read a little bit like this that have come out lately. Because this ability doesn't let us cast the spell as part of the resolution of the ability. Instead, it says you may cast that card this turn without paying its mana cost. What that does is it gives us a special permission for casting the spell from exile. So we would still have to cast a sorcery or an artifact or an enchantment at sorcery speed, but we can do it anytime later in the turn. Maybe we activate Quintorius during our pre-combat main phase, we can do it then. Maybe we activate him during our second main phase, we can cast it then. Maybe we activate his ability in our first main phase and then hold up that spell until later in the turn. If it was an instant, we can cast it then. If it was a sorcery, we're going to have to cast it at sorcery speed, of course, but it can be in any of our main phases after we've activated Quintorius. So just to be clear, Quint's second ability, the end step trigger, it's going to exile a non-creature, non-land card from our graveyard under him. That's how people generally represent it in tabletop Magic, in places like Arena or Magic Online. So it's not just somewhere off in our exile, pile. It's under him. What's important about that is that if Quintorius dies, everything that's exiled with him is just going to stay in exile forever, even if we cast him again, because the second time we cast him, he's a new game object, and anything that got exiled with the first version of him is just lost forever. So, what is this deck trying to do? Our deck is about filling our graveyard and taking big swings with Quint's abilities, all while we build up a spirit army. These big swings, these big spells that we're casting with his ability, I call these Haymakers. cards that are impactful on the board in some kind of notable way. Some of these are going to be an immediate impact, and others will set us up for value in the long term, but they're all sweet. The best part of Commander is being able to play Commander. The second best part of Commander is being able to do exciting, splashy things in Commander. So our strategy, as I mentioned, is a little fragile because it centers on Quint and his last ability. If he gets removed, it sets us back. Therefore, I built the deck in such a way so that the Haymakers that we have are mostly enchantments, which stick around and keep giving us value while we replay Quint. In this way, this is a little bit of an enchantments deck without being an enchantress deck. Notice we have 23 different enchantments in the deck, so about a quarter of our cards are going to be things that either Quintorius is going to bring back for us and will stick around, or things that will support that strategy. So we need to use Quintorius' ability, his third ability, every turn so that we don't lose the cards that he exiles when we lose him. But because his ability lets us cast that exiled spell any time in the rest of our turn, we can do fun things like attack with our spirit creature tokens to try and push some damage through, and then, when they're blocked, activate Quint to sacrifice a blocked token, and then we can cast our spell in our second main phase if it's not an instant. And what's great about Quintorius is that we can fill our graveyard with discard effects or mill effects, but we can also simply cast our big spells once we have the mana to do it, and then exile them with Quint and cast them a second time, on a later turn from his ability. So, let's start talking about our game plan. We're going to begin with our Haymakers. Now, I know you'll note, I said the game plan should be about 30 cards. We have a lot of overlap in this deck in our game plan. Things that will put cards in the graveyard, things that will help us with our spirits. I just wanted to put 26 cards in here and call them Haymakers. So there are plenty of other things you can get with Quint's ability, but these are the ones that all cost at least 3 mana, since that's what his ability costs, and are all going to do something important and impactful when they come in. Or once they have come in, rather. So let's start with Caretaker's Talent. This is a class enchantment from Bloomburrow. For 2 and a white, whenever one or more tokens you control enter, draw a card, but only once per turn. That means if Quintorius is on the battlefield and he's got a target in the graveyard during the end step, Caretaker's Talent being in play means we will exile something from the graveyard, Quint will make a 3/2 red and white spirit, and that will enter and draw us a card. So Caretaker's Talent is drawing us a new card every turn, even if it's in our end step. If it's an instant, we can go ahead and cast that right away or on our opponent's turns. If we have to hold it until next turn, that's also fine. And if it happens to be that our hand is so full that drawing this extra card means we have to go to our cleanup step and discard something, that's also pretty good, because discarding a card puts it in our graveyard and it gives Quintorius something else to exile at the end step of the next turn. But Caretaker's Talent is a class, so it can be leveled up at sorcery speed. For 1 white, we can go to level 2, and it says whenever this class becomes level 2, we create a token that's a copy of a token we control. So that can be like a treasure token if we want, but generally in this deck it's going to be a spirit token. So if Quintorius has made a spirit token and he hasn't sacrificed it, when we level up Caretaker's Talent, we get another spirit creature token if we want to copy that one. Maybe we want to activate Quintorius, but we have an extra white lying around, so we can level this up to level 2, copy whatever spirit he made last turn, and then sacrifice the new one, which has Summoning Sickness, to Quintorius' ability. Finally, once Caretaker's Talent is level 2, we can level it up to level 3 for 3 and a white, and give a static Anthem for all of our creature tokens, making them +2/+2. So all of Quint's tokens will come in as 5/4s. That seems pretty great, and we have lots of other creature tokens in this deck, as you will soon see. Ghostly Prison is not just on theme because of all of our spirits, because we are here digging up ghosts. It's also a great protective spell. 2 and a white, an enchantment that makes it so any of our opponents who attack us have to pay 2 generic mana for each creature that is attacking us, or they just don't get to attack. It's as simple as that. In the Considering section, farther down the page on Moxfield, if you want to check the link for this deck, The Moxfield link is in the description of this video. There are a couple of other instances of this kind of effect, like a spirit creature that will stop this, that will stop our opponents, the way the Ghostly Prison does. I wanted to just feature one and to stick with the enchantments theme, so here is Ghostly Prison. Next up is Grasp of Fate. Grasp of Fate is Banishing Light, or Oblivion Ring, but with a slightly different cost and a slightly different effect. For 1 and 2 white, we get an enchantment that will exile up to 1 target non-land permanent from each other player, each opponent, until Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. So whether we play this on its own or with Quintorius, we're going to be able to get rid of the most threatening or dangerous thing on each of our opponent's playmats until Grasp of Fate goes away. This is also a great way to do some politicking. We can say, all right, I can hit something from everyone, but it's up to. So maybe I don't hit something from you, and in return, you're not going to come after me. Or I am going to hit something from you, but it's going to be something a little weaker, and I'm going to let you give me advice on what you want me to hit from one of the other players. But in return, you've got to do this for me. So Grasp of Fate is a good option here for not quite a board wipe, but good multi-target removal. Muster of the Departed is really fun. For 2 and a white, we have an enchantment from Modern Horizons 3. When it enters, it makes a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So this is another spirit. We don't have to sacrifice just the spirits that Quintorius makes to his ability. We can sacrifice a 1/1 flying spirit if we want. But we can also make a copy of that spirit if we want to, from one of the many ways we have to make copies of things and get more flyers or flying blockers. Speaking of making those copies, Muster the Departed has a morbid ability. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, it doesn't have to be ours, it can be one of our opponents, populate. Populate means make a copy of a token a token copy that's of a creature token we already have. So if we play Muster the Departed on the same turn that we have activated Quintorius, maybe because we're using Quintorius to cast Muster the Departed, at the end step, it's going to make a copy of something already because we sacrificed a spirit to activate Quintorius in the first place. Maybe the copy we make is a different 3/2 spirit that Quintorius has out. Maybe it's this white flying spirit, the 1/1. Maybe it's one of the even better spirits that we get from Hallowed Haunting, which you'll see soon. Muster the Departed is great in this deck. Renewed Solidarity is a really cool card from the Ether Drift commander decks. For 2 and a white, it's an enchantment that asks us to choose a creature type as it enters. Generally, we will choose Spirit. It gives all of our creatures of the chosen type, which I'll just say spirits, +1/+0, so all Quint's spirits are 4/2s. And at the beginning of your end step, for each token you control of that type that entered this turn, make a copy of that token. So every turn, we're going to be able to do this at our end step. Now that triggers at the same time as Quintorius' ability, but we can stack them because this doesn't target. So we don't have to choose targets of what we're making copies of when this goes on the stack. So we have Quintorius' ability trigger first. We have, or trigger, we have it resolve first, I should say. Have it be on the top of the stack. We'll exile something from our graveyard under Quint, we'll make a spirit, then Renewed Solidarity triggers, we make another spirit, since that did enter the battlefield this turn. Muster the Departed also has an end step trigger, so we can have that resolve before Renewed Solidarity as well, getting ourselves a copy with its Populate ability, and then making a copy of that copy with Renewed Solidarity. A lot of fun. Shared Animosity is one of the cards in this deck that is frankly a little annoying for our opponents, just in terms of the math that we're having to do, getting our spirit tokens becoming as dangerous as they are. It's an older card that we see here reprinted in Wilds of Eldraine's Enchanting Tales bonus sheet. For 2 and a red, it's an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So it's not counting creature types, it's counting other creatures that share a type. Generally, that's spirits. We have a bunch of different kinds of spirits, but if we attack with all of them, they're all going to get +1/+0 for each other. So if we attack with 3 spirits, they're all going to get +2/+0, because it's each other attacking creature that shares a type with it. So there's that bonus, plus the bonus we get from Renewed Solidarity. There are several other different bonuses we get that make our spirit tokens dangerous. The Restoration of Eiganjo is one of my favorite white sagas. For 2 and a white, the first chapter is Rampant Growth, or not Rampant Growth rather, but Lay of the Land for a basic plains. Just find a basic plains, put it in your hand. Then, chapter 2, you may discard a card. When you do, return target permanent with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it could just be that plains that we found. We discard the plains, return it to the battlefield tapped. So over the course of, an extra turn, we've sort of rampant growthed ourselves. That's not terrible. But in this deck, with Quintorius wanting things in the graveyard, the ability to discard something, especially something that's not cheap, is pretty great. Even if we don't get to bring something back with Restoration of Eiganjo's, with the remainder of that chapter ability, we can bring something back later on by exiling it with Quint and then casting it on by activating his last ability. So it lets us entomb something, get something into the graveyard, maybe bring something back if we've already got, let's say, a land in our graveyard or something cheaper. It's great. But even better, maybe, the third ability is exile the saga, return to the battlefield transformed as a 3/4 vigilant creature called Architect of Restoration that says whenever it attacks or blocks, make a 1/1 colorless spirit. So we're building up all kinds of different spirits in this deck. This one can't fly, like Muster of the Departed. It's not a 3/2 like Quintorius's spirits, but it's still strong, and we can get more and more and more of them if we're able to attack or block with the Architect of Restoration. Next up is Warleader's Call. For 1, a white, and a red, we have an enchantment that is just Glorious Anthem plus Impact Tremors. All of our creatures get +1/+1, and whenever a creature enters, Warleader's Call deals 1 damage to each opponent. Enters under our control, I should say. So this is going to trigger during our end step when Quintorius makes us a 3/2, but it's going to come in and be a 4/3 because of the Anthem effect from Warleader's Call. This just gets things bigger and more annoying every time. Like Shared Animosity, being a little bit of an annoying card is a good thing because it makes our opponents a little frustrated with what we have going on, which means they're likely to want to do some removing. And if the card is annoying enough to be threatening, that's going to be the card they remove rather than Quintorius. Now, I know you're thinking, well, why wouldn't they just remove Quintorius? They might, and we have different ways of protecting him from that. But if all they have in hand is a Naturalize or a Disenchant, they'll go for one of our cards that's giving us value, but not so much value that we're so sad to see it go. Warleader's Call is a good include in this. Next up, we have Court of Grace. We're into our 4-mana spells. For 2 white, we have an enchantment that when it enters, we become the Monarch. The Monarch just means that during our end step, we have a trigger that draws us a card, and if anyone does combat damage to us, they become the Monarch, and the rules are the same for them. So it's great because it keeps games moving. But also, at the beginning of our upkeep, we make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Same thing the Muster of the Departed makes. But if we're the Monarch, we make a 4/4 flying angel instead. That's great. It doesn't feed into our spirit synergies. But it is something we can populate. It is something we can make copies of. So angels just win games. This Court of Grace is a great include in this deck. For the same cost, 2 white, we have Hallowed Haunting, which I mentioned a moment ago. Hallowed Haunting has 2 great effects. The first is that as long as we control 7 or more enchantments, which again, we have 23 in the deck, all of our creatures have flying and vigilance. We're doing great if that's the case. But in addition, whenever we cast an enchantment, we make a white spirit cleric creature token that has power and toughness equal to the number of spirits we control. Not necessarily the number of spirits that we made with Hallowed Haunting. All of the spirits we're making with Muster of the Departed, or Court of Grace, or Quintorius. All of these spirit clerics are bigger because of those things. So that's great. On Wings of Gold is another Ether Drift commander deck card that is really fun. For 3 and a white, we have an enchantment that gives all of our creatures that are zombies and or tokens +1/+1 and flying. So another way to give them flying, give them some evasion to swing right in, and it's an anthem, it pumps them up. But in addition, whenever 1 or more cards leave our graveyard, create a 1/1 white zombie creature token. So it's not a spirit, but it is a free token every time 1 or more cards leave our graveyard, which is to say every time Quintorius' second ability triggers at our end step. Great. Quintorius will exile something under him, make a 3/2 spirit, which will, after that resolves, make us a 1/1 white zombie. And both of those tokens have +1/+1 and flying. It's great. Let's go to our 5 mana spells. Call for Unity is 3 white for an enchantment with Revolt. At the beginning of our end step, if a permanent we controlled left the battlefield this turn, put a Unity counter and call for Unity. And all of our creatures get +1/+1 for every Unity counter on this card. That's great. Because Quintorius we're going to try and activate him every turn, which means we're going to have a spirit leaving the battlefield every turn, which means we're going to get a Unity counter at the end step of every turn, and all of our creatures are just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what's great about that is Call for Unity doesn't seem that threatening. So it will depower us a lot if it's triggered a bunch of times and our opponents remove it. But if we don't have creatures, it's not doing much for us, which means our opponents are probably just going to leave it there. So if we are able to rebuild, let's say after a board wipe, and get a bunch of creatures out, they're going to come in as something huge, especially if we've got other cards in play like War Leader's Call, Renewed Solidarity, and so forth. Good times. Next up, I really think this is fun. Curse of Bloodletting. For a 3 red, we have a curse. It's an aura that enchants another player. We could enchant ourselves, but let's not. If a source would deal damage to the enchanted player, it deals double damage instead. We have a couple of different ways in this deck of doubling our damage, but Curse of Bloodletting is even better because it doesn't say if a source we control would deal damage to an enchanted player. So we can use this in a great political way by saying, who should I be casting this on? We can put this on the strongest player so that everyone can gang up on them, which means we're not being focused on, or maybe not the strongest player as we make a deal with the strongest player to put it on their biggest rival. So Curse of Bloodletting, a lot of fun, especially because it's not like symmetric among our opponents. Next up, Elspeth Conquers Death. I really do love this saga. ECD is 3 and 2 white for a saga that starts with Chapter 1. Exile target permanent and opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater. Just get rid of the biggest, scariest thing on the battlefield. Just get done with it. The second chapter is non-creature spells your opponents cast cost 2 generic mana more to cast until your next turn. So maybe our opponents want to interact with us, and if they do, it's going to cost them more. Maybe they're going to have to think a little harder about their sequencing. It's just a nice bonus. But maybe the best one of these is return target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on it or a loyalty counter on it. This gets Quintorius back. If we time it right, we can get Quintorius back right when we need to. And it puts a counter on him. Now, in addition, we can get back other creatures that we may have. I don't have any planeswalkers in this deck, but if you want to alter the deck, maybe you have a bigger budget or a smaller budget, like I mentioned. At the bottom of this page, of course, the Moxfield link is in the video description. There's a considering section with lots of different other options. If you want to customize this deck, feel free. There's plenty of cool ideas there, and maybe you want to put some planeswalkers in too. That just gives you more value out of Elspeth Conquers Death. It's great. Gratuitous Violence is 2 and 3 red for an enchantment that doubles the damage any of our creatures do. Damage to permanents or to players. So there's something a little subtle about this. It doesn't double all the damage we do. So if we were to have like a lightning bolt, it's not going to double that damage. It's only damage done by creatures, which means it's a splashy, dangerous enchantment that is helping the primary way we do damage, but it's sort of oversized in people's minds. Damage doublers, or damage triplers even, seem the most scary to our opponents. So if they have something that can Utter End, or some other card that can get rid of any permanent or any non-land permanent, maybe they're not hitting Quintorius with it. Maybe they're going after Gratuitous Violence just to downpower everything. Because we're able to go wide with this deck over time with all of our spirits. So maybe they don't go after our combo engine, which is our commander. They get rid of Gratuitous Violence instead, which, it's a 5-mana spell that's powerful and helps us out a lot. But I don't know. I think that the psychological impact that something like a damage doubler can be is oversized in players' minds a lot of the time. I think that's a little bit of a bonus to it. Next up is another 5-mana one, but this is a sorcery. Into the Time Vortex from the Doctor Who decks. For 4 and a red, it has 2 words that are the rules: Cascade and Rebound. Cascade means when we cast this spell, whether we're casting it for its mana cost or as part of what Quintorius does with his ability, we exile cards from the top of our library until we get a non-land card that costs less. Costs less doesn't mean costs less than we paid for it. It just means it costs less than the mana value of this card. So anything that's 4 mana value or less. We flip cards over until we find one of those. We can cast it for free if we want. Everything else that we flipped over goes on the bottom of the library in a random order. And then Rebound. If we cast this spell from our hand, we exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. So Into the Time Vortex is great for us to just cast, get something for free. The next turn, it casts again as part of Rebound. We get something else for free. I guess the first one isn't free. We're paying for Into the Time Vortex, but the second one is free. Then this goes into our graveyard, where we can exile it with Quintorius and get a third thing from it. That's great. Just a lot of good value there for 5 mana, and then 3 later, we're going to get upwards of 12 mana value of worth. Seems a lot of fun. Next up, we have Sphere of Safety. Sphere of Safety is sort of the bigger daddy version of Ghostly Prison. Sphere of Safety is a 5-mana enchantment that says creatures can't attack you, or planeswalkers you control, unless their controller pays an amount of generic mana equal to the number of enchantments you control. So while Ghostly Prison says that's got to be 2 for every creature, if we have out all of these 8 cards, if we have these 4, let's say, we'll just make it simpler, then Sphere of Safety requires our opponents to pay 4 mana for each creature that's attacking, or they just can't attack. Bigger, better, safer, costs a little more, but it still costs 3 if we cast it with Quintorius' ability. Next up is Song of the World Soul. Really fun. 4 white for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell, populate. Every spell you cast, even the ones you cast without having to pay their mana cost, like Quintorius, through Quintorius' ability. We populate. We make all the spirits that we need to. Great times. Another fun one is Sunbird's Invocation. 5 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's mana value, even if you didn't pay its mana cost. You may cast a spell with mana value X or less from among the cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's a little bit like Cascade. We just look at the top several cards based on whatever the mana value of the card was. If we cast Song of the World Soul, we look at the top 6 and we can cast something with mana value 6 or less, just for free. And then all of the other ones we looked at will go on the bottom. So Sunbird's Invocation is one of the Haymakers that sets us up for later. But also, it works really well with Quintorius. We have this out, and then we cast, Gratuitous Violence off of Quintorius. We'll get to look at the top 5 and put something that's mana value 5 or less onto the stack. That's great. Next up, Hit the Motherlode, another sorcery for 4 and triple red. Discover 10. If the discovered card's mana value is less than 10, create a number of tapped treasures equal to the difference. So Discover, not quite the same as Cascade, but kind of similar. We exile cards from the top of our library until we find a non-land card that is mana value, in this case, 10 or less. We can either cast it for free or put it in our hand. and then the rest of the cards we exiled go on the bottom of our library in a random order. Discover 10 means whatever next spell we hit in this deck, we can cast. There's nothing in the deck that costs more than 10. But if we hit a 1-drop or a 2-drop, then we make 9 or 8 rather, tapped treasure tokens, so that helps us out later. Hit the Mother Lode is always fun because, like anything else that has Cascade or something like it, we just spin into something. It doesn't matter what it is, it's going to be a good time. Next up, we have the Wondrous Crucible. 7 mana for an artifact from the Brothers War commander decks that says permanents you control have Ward 2. So protects our spirits, specifically protects Quint. Sounds great. At the beginning of your end step, mill 2 cards, then exile a non-land card at random from your graveyard, copy it, and you can cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So this is a little bit of a non-bow if we're not judicious about taking cards out of our graveyard with Quint, because we might lose it. We might just get it as a get a card exiled with Wondrous Crucible and only have it as a copy, which means if that copy goes away, it's not going to the graveyard for us to bring back with Quint a second time. But generally it's okay. We get something like Song of the World Soul, unless someone has a way to bounce this or otherwise remove it, that's okay. We got to cast a 6-mana spell for free. Yeah. Plus, of course, it's milling. So it's putting cards in our graveyard that we can get out with Quint. We can exile under Quint. Next up is an 8-mana sorcery called Call Forth the Tempest for 5 and triple red. It has Cascade and Cascade, so we cascade twice with it from a value of 8. And then, after we have cast those spells off of the Cascade abilities, Call Forth the Tempest deals damage to each creature your opponents control, equal to the total mana value of other spells you've cast this turn. So if Call Forth the Tempest, cascades into Song of the World Soul, and then Sunbird's Invocation, then it's going to do damage to each creature equal to the mana value of the other spells we cast this turn, which is 12. That's why it cascades twice first. So this is our board wipe, which we will see again under the Wraths section. But it's also a haymaker because it's just really splashy and great. Also notable, as I already said, it only does that damage to creatures our opponents control. That's just good value there. It's 8 mana for a board wipe, but if we need a board wipe, we're probably willing to pay 8 mana for it, even in our Spirit Creatures deck. And this double cascade is just a lot of fun. So, City on Fire is another 8 mana spell for 5 red, but it has Convoke, so we can tap creatures to help pay for the casting, the cost of the spell. They will produce mana, or they are treated as though they pay for a generic mana or a mana of that creature's color. Keep in mind, Quintorius' spirits are red and white, so we could tap 3 spirits to pay for the 3 red and just have to pay 5 more generic. Regardless, City on Fire is a damage tripler. If a source we control, not just a creature like Gratuitous Violence, if a source we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple damage. That does stack with Gratuitous Violence, so it'll sextuple. So yeah, City on Fire, another big splashy card, definitely one that players will want to get rid of because it will end games if they don't. So that's good times. Legion Loyalty is an 8 mana spell, an enchantment, that just gives all of our creatures Myriad. Myriad is really fun because it says, whenever a creature with Myriad attacks, for each opponent other than the defending player, we make a token that's a copy of the creature with Myriad that is tapped and attacking a different player or planeswalker. So yeah, we get to take each of our spirits and turn it, if we have 3 opponents, every time one of our spirits attacks, we get 2 more spirits, each attacking the other 2 opponents. That's true of all of our creatures. So if we have 5 spirits, we can attack all of them into one opponent, and now we have 15 spirits, 5 for each of our opponents. Those tokens, the Myriad tokens, get exiled to the end of combat, but notably, Quintorius can, with that exile trigger on the stack, Quintorius can go ahead and sacrifice one of those to give us permission to cast one of the spells exiled under him. So we don't have to get rid of one of our good are actual tokens that we get to keep. We can get rid of one of the myriad tokens. And like I mentioned earlier, we could do it before they die in combat, if they would die in combat. So this is just a big, again, splashy card that can definitely end games, particularly when it's combined with something like City on Fire or Gratuitous Violence. All right, we've got 2 more in the Haymaker section. Soulfire Eruption is a 9-mana red spell for 6 red, red, red. It's a sorcery that says, choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, and or players. So we're choosing, essentially, every enemy creature, planeswalker, and opponent. For each of those chosen, exile the top card of your library, then this card deals damage equal to that card's mana value to that permanent or player, and we can play those exiled cards until the end of our next turn. So we're drawing a bunch of cards, essentially, and doing a lot of damage to just everyone. Maybe it's some small things, but maybe it's things like Wondrous Crucible or City on Fire. That's insane. This is a source, obviously, which means City on Fire is going to triple that damage if we need it to. So this is just a great combination here, but I mean, it's also 17 mana, so of course it's going to be a big scary thing. Anyway, Soulfire Eruption, exiled under Quintorius, is going to scare our opponents because they're going to be able to see that next turn it might just be a board wipe for all of their creatures and planeswalkers, and maybe even them. So yeah, Soulfire Eruption seems like a lot of fun. Finally, our 10-mana spell is Stormherd. 8 and 2 white for a sorcery. It makes a number of 1/1 flying Pegasuses equal to our life total. So if our life total is doing good, we get a bunch of Pegasi. If we're down to 10, we still get 10 flyers for 10 mana. They're all 1/1s, but that's pretty good for blocking. Stormherd is just a lot of fun in this deck, especially if it is just something that, it can definitely end games, but it's splashy, and we want to see Quintorius do big splashy things. These are also additional tokens that we can populate if we want to, make copies of. Yeah, lots of things that we can do with Stormherd. So, next up, also part of our game plan, are cards that get our cards into the graveyard, because we can't exile them from our graveyard with Quintorius if they're not there in the first place. So we only have a few here, and some of them we may have talked about already. We're going to start with Collector's Vault. For 2 mana, we have an artifact that for 2 and tap, we draw a card, we discard a card, and we make a treasure. This is a little bit of slow ramp. It doesn't actually give us card advantage, even though I do have it listed under our card advantage section, which you'll see in a moment why. But more importantly, it lets us loot. We draw and we discard. So we get to put something of our choice from our hand into the graveyard. For 2 mana, that's a good way to just get something into our graveyard when we're ready to spend 3 mana on Quintorius to go ahead and exile it. Or rather, to get to our end step and exile with Quintorius. Next up, Highway Robbery. This is our Tormenting Voice, Thrill of Possibility type thing. I guess it's more Tormenting Voice because it's a sorcery. For 1 and a red, we may discard a card or sacrifice a land, and if we do, we draw 2 cards. So sacrificing a land, if it's late game and we really just need to draw cards and we don't care about getting something into our graveyard, that's excellent. But discarding a card, put something in our graveyard, yeah, that we want to be able to get rid of get under Quintorius. And in return, we get to draw 2. But also, Highway Robbery has Plot for 1 and a red. So we can pay the 1 and a red to cast this, or we can pay the 1 and a red to put this in exile, and then as a sorcery, cast it for free on a later turn. So maybe we have this in our opening hand, and on turn 2, we plot it. And then we wait 8 more turns before we need to use it, and we have something special in our hand we want to get into the graveyard, or we're really desperate for cards. Highway Robbery just sits there in exile waiting for us to cast it as though it were in our hand, but we can do it for free later. Terrific. Inti, Seneschal of the Sun, is a 2/2 human knight for 1 and a red. I know you're surprised to hear me read a creature card. We haven't seen a lot of those so far. So whenever we attack, not necessarily with Inti, but just attack at all, we may discard a card, which is why he's in this section. And when we do, we put a 1/1 counter on an attacking creature, and it gains trample until end of turn. But second ability that triggers off of the first, and anytime we would discard something. Whenever you discard one or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until your next end step. So Inti replaces whatever cards we discard, at least until the end of our next end step. Until our next end step, that is. But lets us have that discard anyway, and gives us a little bit of evasion. If we have, a lot of big tokens out there because we've gotten so many of our Anthem effects together, Inti is going to let us push that damage by giving our creature a counter and trample, at least one of them. We have Millikan. Millikan is a great way for us to ramp in this deck. It's a 2-mana artifact creature that's just an 0/1, but for tap it and mill a card, we add a colorless mana. Milling a card is maybe not as good as discarding because we don't have the ability to choose, but it still puts things in our graveyard. And if we've gotten something on top of our library that we want in our graveyard, we're all set with that. We've seen Restoration of Iganjo, of course. Big Score is sort of a bigger version of, it's not Tormenting Voice because it's an instant speed, it's Thrill of Possibility. For 3 and a red, as an additional cost, we discard a card, so we're getting a benefit out of that. Then we draw 2 cards and make 2 treasures. These treasures are not tapped. Same thing for the Collector's Vault, so we can use them right away. Unexpected Windfall is the same thing as Big Score, except it has a little bit more restrictive mana cost. It's 2 red versus 3 in a red, but both very good. And then we've already seen Wondrous Crucible, so we will move on. Since we're now talking about things that draw us cards, we're going to move on to our card advantage section. Longtime viewers know that I just use the word draw right here to represent card advantage. Not all of this is just about drawing cards. So we've seen Collector's Vault and Highway Robbery. Idol of Oblivion is great in this deck. For 2 mana, it's an artifact that taps to just draw a card, as long as we've created a token this turn. So in our end step, we let Quintorius' second ability resolve, exile something from our graveyard under him, make our token, and once that's resolved, it's still our end step. We haven't passed priority, we tap Idol of Oblivion and draw ourselves a card. There are plenty of ways we make tokens earlier in the turn if we want to activate it then, but either way, just 2 mana and no cost beyond tapping this, and it can work, of course, the turn it comes in. It just gives us as many cards as we need. It additionally lets us pay 8, tap, and sack it to make a 10/10 Eldrazi creature token. That is something we can populate if we need a big blocker or even big damage coming in. Idol of Oblivion, terrific choice in this deck. Terrific include in this deck, not terrific choice. Thanks, me. I did a good job. Oh, no problem, me. So we've seen Inti. Mind Stone. I put Mind Stone in a lot of my decks. It's just useful. 2 mana for a mana rock that taps for colorless, and then 1 tap and sack, draw a card. Yeah. We've seen Caretaker's Talent. Now Commander Sphere. For 3 mana, we get an artifact. We get a mana rock that taps for 1 of any color in our commander's color identity, or we can sacrifice it to draw a card. As opposed to Mind Stone, we don't have to pay or tap it to sacrifice it and draw that card. So we can tap it for mana and then sacrifice it to draw if we want to. Next up, we have Lelia, the Blade Reforged. Lelia is a great card. 2 and a red for a 2/2 Spirit Warrior. It's a spirit, so it helps us out with haste. When Lelia attacks, we exile the top card of our library, and we can play it this turn. And whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from our library or from our graveyard, we put a 1/1 counter on Lelia. So Lelia triggers herself. When she attacks, we exile the top card of our library. That triggers her second ability. We put a counter on her. But also, Quintorius exiles cards from our graveyard, so they'll also put counters on Lelia. She just gets big, she's hasty, she's a spirit. We love Lelia. We've seen these 3 cards, but we haven't seen Nayali, Sun's Vanguard. Nayali is a 3/3 human rebel for 2, a red and a white, that says attacking tokens you control have double strike. It's not doubling our damage, but if it's not blocked, it is. So this is just double strike is just a great way to force our opponents to make hard choices when it comes to blocks. But in addition, whenever 1 or more tokens we control attack a player, we exile the top card of our library, and during any turn we attacked with a token, we can play that card. Oftentimes, The way you represent this is by exiling those cards under Niali. But then, of course, even if Niali is removed, we still have permission as part of the effect that exiled them to play those cards any turn that we attacked with a token. So we just build up and build up and build up extra cards that might as well be in our hand but can't be interacted with as though they were. That's great. Unexpected Windfall, we've seen. Wild Magic Sorcerer, really fun included in this deck. There are several different cards in the Considering section that care about you casting spells from exile. I think I kept only 2 of them in the deck because I had to cut it down, but this is a terrific one. That's why it's $8.50 on Card Kingdom. For 3 and a red, we get a 4/3 Orc Shaman that says the first spell you cast from exile each turn has Cascade. So anything we cast from exile, like anything we were to cascade into from Into the Time Vortex, or if it just rebounds, that works. But also, most importantly in this deck, while this guy's on the battlefield, every time we cast something with Quintorius' third ability, or using Quintorius' third ability, we're going to cascade into something else. So we get 2 spells for the price of 3, since that's what Quintorius costs to activate. It seems really fun. We have seen all of the rest of these, so that is our card advantage section. Let's talk about ramp. We've got a little bit extra ramp in this deck. Obviously we have Soul Ring, 1 mana, taps for 2 colorless. Can't say no to that. Arcane Signet, 2 mana, taps for 1 of any color in our commander's color identity. Of course we want to have these in as many decks as that we're able to run them in, and that's basically every deck, with just a few exceptions. Boros Signet is another 2 mana rock. It requires you to have mana, but it will filter it into 2. So it's almost like it taps for 1, it just can't do it by itself. And it makes sure to fix our mana in the process. We've seen our Collector's Vault and our Millikan, and our Mind Stone and our Commander Sphere. But now, Patriarch's Seal is a 3 mana rock, taps for 1 mana of any color, but also, for 1 and tap, we can untap a legendary creature we control. That's Quintorius. That's why it's in here. So we can activate Quintorius once, sacrificing a spirit, giving us permission to cast something that's exiled under him, then pay 1 and tap this, and we can untap Quintorius and do it again. As long as we have the mana and the spirit to sacrifice, we can get 2 castings from under Quintorius. That just seems like a good value. We've seen all of our other cards that ramp us. These are giving us ramp in the form of treasures. It's not really ramp, it's more acceleration, but it does accelerate us. That's pretty fun. We're going to go on to the interaction section, which I just call removal. As you can see, I've chosen to use the art from a couple of the cards from the Mystical Archive from Strixhaven because this is a Quintorius deck. There are cheaper versions of Lightning Bolt, so if you don't want to pay $4 for it. But Lightning Bolt is 1 red. It's an instant. It deals 3 damage to any target. It goes in red decks. Put it in your red decks. Great. We also have Path to Exile and Source to Plowshares. Really good removal spells in white. They both essentially do the same thing, but with one last difference. For 1 white, they are instants, and they exile a target creature. Source of Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to its power. Path of Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. These are all excellent removal spells. So is Lightning Helix. For a red and a white, 3 damage to any target, and you gain 3 life. It's just Lightning Bolt plus Healing Salve, essentially. Rip Apart I have in here instead of a Braid, but it just works well. We can either choose to do 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or we can disenchant something. Artifact or enchantment gets destroyed. That's great. Grasp of Fate we've already talked about. If we want to get rid of any non-land permanent, we have Stroke of Midnight. Blows it up for 3 mana and gives them a 1/1 human for their trouble. We have Return to Dust if we really need to get rid of an artifact or an enchantment. And if we cast it during our main phase, we can get 2 artifacts, 2 enchantments, or 1 of each. Notably, this is 4 mana, and it's an instant, so if we wanted to exile this with Quintorius, we could activate Quintorius and then use this right away. And we can use it during our main phase. We don't have to, but we can if we want to get the double value out of it. We've already seen Elspeth Conquers Death and Soulfire Eruption. This is, I guess, removal. It's going to remove some things for sure. Finally, we've seen our only wrath. It's Call Forth the Tempest, but it's worth noting that this is a pretty good removal, a pretty good board wipe. So getting rid of most of the things on the battlefield for 8 mana is pretty expensive, but we might be doing it just for 3 and getting 2 cards out of it in the process. All right, let's talk about our other cards that are here to help our game plan, help our strategy. We have things that are spirits, or things that care about spirits. We'll start with Haunted Library. For 1 and a white, we have an enchantment that says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we can pay a generic mana to make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. This is another great source of creature tokens for us, spirits particularly, that we can use when our opponent's creatures die. That doesn't have to be on our turn or due to our own attacks. We can just build up some mana, or save it up rather, and while we're watching our opponents hit each other, we count up whatever died, we pay an amount of mana equal to those creatures, and we get a bunch of spirits. Pretty great. Selfless Spirit is just a spirit on its own. 1 and a white for a 2/1 flyer, we can sacrifice it and all of our creatures are indestructible until end of turn. Maybe we care about making all of our creatures indestructible. Maybe we care only about keeping Quintorius from being destroyed. Either way, Selfless Spirit's going to help us. Unfortunately, we can't bring it back with Quintorius because Quintorius only brings back non-land and non-creatures, but still great for even just as a one-shot. Spirit Bonds, I just think this card is fun. For 1 and a white, we have an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay a white, and if we do, we make one of those 1/1 flying spirits. As you can see, we're not running that many creatures, and these have to be non-token, so it doesn't trigger off of our spirits. But what Spirit Bonds actually gives us is a repeatable Selfless Spirit effect for 1 creature. For 1 and a white and sacrifice a spirit, target non-spirit creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Spirit Bonds is in here for us to protect Quintorius. It can't stop him from being bounced or exiled or threatened, but it can certainly keep him from being destroyed. We've got plenty of spirits sitting around to do that. I think this is a worthy include for protection. We have seen the next several cards. Let's talk about Twilight Drover. For 2 and a white, we get a 1/1 spirit. It's a spirit that says whenever a creature token leaves the battlefield, so that's every time we do anything, every time we activate Quintorius's 3rd ability on our turn, we put a 1/1 counter on Twilight Drover. And then, for 2 and a white, and removing a 1/1 counter from Twilight Drover, we make 2 spirits that fly. That's great. Pumping out more spirits, just getting benefits from it over time. When we've got a lot of mana and we can only activate Quintorius once every turn, Twilight Drover is going to keep us fat with spirits. Notably, that 2nd ability is not as a sorcery, so we can have surprise blockers, or just wait until the person to our right's end step and get some surprise attackers during their end step. Seems pretty all right. We have talked about the next 2, but we haven't talked about Hofri Ghostforge. I built a standard deck around this guy back when Kaldheim and AFR and Strixhaven were in standard. For 3, a red and a white, we get a Dwarf Cleric that is a 4/5 that gives all of our spirits +1/+1, trample, and haste. And this next ability is a little weird, but go with me. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it, and create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit, that has the ability when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. It's a little strange, but Arena does a good job of illustrating how this works. The way you do it is you have one of your creatures die, you make a copy of it that's a spirit by exiling that creature from your graveyard. It just leaves your graveyard, and it won't come back to your graveyard until the spirit copy of it has gone away, has left the battlefield. So this is a card that causes cards to leave the battlefield, or to leave your graveyard rather. So we have triggers that care about that. But more importantly, it makes our things into spirits. We don't have that many creatures, but we probably want them to be spirits. We probably want them to be bumped up by Hofri, and we probably want them to have trample. Most of all, Hofri makes it so our tokens are bigger, faster, and trample. And if Quintorius dies, we can have him not return to the command zone, go to the graveyard, and trigger Hoffrey. Quintorius gets exiled and comes back. Instead of as a 3/5, he comes back as a 3/5 spirit and has +1/+1, trample, and haste. That haste might be useful for just swinging in with him if we wanted to. We might want to use that. But either way, once that token copy of him dies, Quintorius's actual card will go back to the graveyard, which will trigger the state-based action, and we can put him back in our command zone and recast him. So Hoffrey is a lot of fun in this deck. Also, we have Quintorius Field Historian, the first Quintorius from Strixhaven. For the same cost as our commander, 3 red and white, we get a 2/4 that gives all of our spirits +1/+0, and whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, make a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. So the same kind of tokens that our commander makes. But this Quintorius makes all of those tokens, while he's on the battlefield, into 4/2s, and he will also trigger off of our commander's triggers. So we'll be able to exile something at the end step with our commander, make a 3/2 spirit from our commander, and then this Quintorius will see that. We'll see that a card has left our graveyard and make an additional spirit. And keep all those spirits a little bit more powerful. Seems fun. Finally, we have Drogskull Cavalry, a 7-mana, 4/4 flying spirit knight. It's a spirit. Whenever another spirit enters the battlefield under your control, it doesn't say non-token, you gain 2 life. 2 life, it's not bad. But if we, again, just have some mana sitting around, a mana sink on Drogskull Cavalry that doesn't require it to tap, for 3 and a white, we create a 1/1 flying spirit. That's great. Just making more spirits, filling up the air. All right, we've talked about our spirits. Let's talk about how to protect them and our commander and ourselves. We've actually seen all of these cards except for Swiftfoot Boots. Some of these cards are protecting us, like Ghostly Prison and Sphere of Safety. Some of them are protecting Quintorius and our other permanents, like Wondrous Crucible, Spirit Bond, Selfless Spirit. Hoffrey is kind of protecting Quintorius and our other non-token creatures by bringing them back. And then the Swiftfoot Boots are pretty simple. For 2 mana, and equip for 1, you get an equipment that gives equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste doesn't help Quintorius that much with his abilities, but who knows? Maybe we're going to be able to swing in. The hexproof is what we care about. We don't have to make him indestructible if they can't target him at all, assuming it's not a board wipe. So, next up, let's talk about our token synergy. I know you thought that was just spirits, but we've got some tokens that are not spirits. So we've seen Haunted Library. We've seen all of these. Are any of these ones that we haven't seen? No, we've seen them all. Great. So you know what all of these cards do and how they help us out with tokens, some of which are spirits, some might not be. But we have lots of different ways to really get our opponents with our army of tokens. Finally, we have this synergy section. Synergy is what I call this section of cards that will just give us value for doing things we were going to do anyway. For example, Intangible Virtue. Intangible Virtue gives all of our tokens +1/+1 and Vigilance. This is not, it's 2 mana, so it's pretty cheap. And it's not really a haymaker, but we can sure use it. It's still a non-creature, non-land, so if we wanted to, maybe we milled it and we really want it, we're willing to pay a little extra for that by using Quintorius' ability to put it to cast it. Speaking of Quintorius' ability, though, Strionic Resonator costs 2 mana, and for 2 and tap, we can copy a triggered ability we control. We choose new targets for the copy. Now that's triggered ability. That's not Quintorius' third ability, where we can cast a spell, but we can copy his second ability. We can exile 2 things from our graveyard by having copied it, and make 2 spirit tokens. So that's pretty helpful. Similarly, we have Battle Mage's Bracers. 2 and a red for an equipment that equips for 2, gives equipped creature haste, and when an ability of that creature is activated, if it is a mana ability, we can pay 1 and copy it. So we can use this for Quintorius' third ability, the one that lets us sacrifice spirits and get permission to cast spells for free. So Strionic Resonator is here to make it so we double up his second ability that makes spirits and exiles cards under him. Battle Mage's Bracers lets us double up his third ability that lets us sacrifice spirits and get permission to cast spells for free. We've seen Muster the Departed, Patriarch Seal, Renewed Solidarity, Twilight Drover, War Leader's Call. We've seen all of these with the exception of Keeper of Secrets. This is a creature from the Warhammer 40k decks. For 5 and a red, we get a 6/4 demon with First Strike and Haste that has the ability Symphony of Pain. Whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, Keeper of Secrets deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So whenever we cast anything from exile, from the graveyard, we're going to be able to do damage. That means whenever we use Quintorius' third ability, we can cast a spell and get a bonus of damage directly to one of our opponent's faces, and then the spell resolves. We still get what we wanted out of it. So that covers the deck. As I mentioned in all of my videos, I have this considering section here with a bunch of cards that I thought about but decided against just to build the deck the way that I like to build decks. There are plenty of cards in that section to expand your options. If you want to go into a little bit more of a budget, I have some more expensive cards in there as well, like Chimley, I have a few. So you've got different options. Before we finish up, let's go into our land base. So we're going to start it off with our basics. We've got 27 basics, 12 mountains, 15 plains. We want to have a lot of basics in this so that we can make sure we have, we don't get stuck behind our, on some tap lands, for example. We don't have a huge amount of land ramp, but we have a little bit in the form of cards that find plains. So that's why we're a little heavier on plains. In addition, our color balance is just a little bit heavier toward white. So that's our justification there. We're running Boros Garrison as a bounce land. I love bounce lands because they don't really accelerate you, but they do hit your land drop. Make sure you hit your land drop the next turn. As long as you play this after turn 2, you're doing great. I also love check lands. Clifftop Retreat is generally going to come in untapped because we have plenty of mountains and plains in our deck. Obviously, if you want to upgrade, what I would consider an upgrade to this is Sundown Pass, the slow land that comes in untapped as long as it's not your first or second land in play. So yeah, but generally, Clifftop Retreat is going to come in untapped. I'm running Sun-Scorched Divide, this filter land. It does the same thing as the Boros Signet. If you wanted to upgrade that to a more traditional dual land, you could throw in a Shock Land, for example, or maybe even a Surveil land. It comes in tapped, but you're able to get a little value out of its Surveil trigger. I have 6 fixing lands in this deck. We've got, obviously, Command Tower, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. It's untapped. Why wouldn't you run this? Path of Ancestry, same thing, except it comes in tapped. But then, if you use its mana to cast a creature that shares a type with our commander, we scry one. That means if we cast Quintorius with Path of Ancestry's mana, we'll scry. We also have we have one other elephant, which is the other Quintorius, and a few other clerics, since Quintorius is a cleric. So yeah, Path of Ancestry, even if it were just a tapped command tower, is worth running. We also have Temple of the False God. Yeah, early on it doesn't do anything, but once we have 4 other lands, it's a soul ring. Of course we're going to run this. Finally, we have 3 soft fetches. Evolving Wilds and Cabaret Courtyard can find any of our basics, and Cabaret Courtyard will even give us a life for our trouble. And Myriad Landscape is a little bit of ramp. It does come in tapped, but it taps for colorless, and for 2 and tap and sacrifice it, we can find 2 basics that share a land type. So we can find whatever color that we need most. We have a pathway in the form of Needle of Verge and Pillar Verge pathway. It's not typed, but it comes in as whichever color we want. And last, we have Demolition Field. Taps for colorless. We can pay 2, tap and sacrifice it, blow up a non-basic of our opponents, then they rampant growth, and we rampant growth. It just gets rid of problem lands. Maybe you have a creature land that your opponent is that you're having to deal with, that they're attacking with. Maybe you have Glacial Chasm. I know I mentioned Glacial Chasm in a lot of these videos, but I have a friend who runs it a lot, so it's worth getting rid of with Demolition Field. So that about sums it up. Again, I'm going to be building one of these decks for every legendary creature in March of the Machine's main set, at the very least. If there's something you want to see, one of those particular commanders, or a specific way you want me to build that deck, please let me know in the comments below. Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.